To discover anything new, you must start on your own. You must start on a journey completely denuded. Learning implies the love of understanding and the love of doing a thing for itself. Learning is never accumulative. It is a constant movement. Please continue watching for the shared enlightening perceptions by the beloved Jiddu Krishnamurti.
Jiddu Krishnamurti was an internationally renowned spiritual figure born in 1895 in southern India, who to this present day is still considered one of the greatest thinkers and religious teachers of all time. He did not proclaim any religion, sect, or country, and always pointed out that we are first humans and do not need to identify with nationality, race, or religious beliefs. From 1929 until his death in 1986, Jiddu Krishnamurti traveled throughout the world talking to large audiences, individuals, scientists, religious figures, writers, philosophers, educators, as well as giving radio and television interviews. Krishnamurti's message emphasized the great need of a radical change for humankind. His deep insights on the nature of the human mind enabled him to deliver his talks in a fresh and direct way, making audience members feel like he was addressing them personally. Krishnamurti's only concern was to set humanity absolutely unconditionally free. His vision was for humans to have a more profound understanding of themselves and of the art of living, so as to bring about a new and peaceful generation. A compassionate vegetarian, the beloved Krishnamurti was also a founder of schools in India, the United States, and the United Kingdom. They are based on a holistic, global outlook with a concern for humanity and the environment and their interconnected relationship. The schools were established to be places where the existential concerns of life could be explored freely and responsibly. In addition, Jiddu Krishnamurti was an author of numerous books. Among them are The Awakening of Intelligence, The Urgency of Change, Freedom from the Known, and The Flight of the Ego. We now continue with an excerpt from Jiddu Krishnamurti's precious guidance in The Book of Life, a collection of the highly respected thinkers' spiritual insights for every day. The following daily meditations focus on the more profound way of learning, which is different from the mere cultivating of knowledge and experienced impressions throughout our life. Look with intensity. It seems to me that learning is astonishingly difficult, as is listening also. We never actually listen to anything because our mind is not free. Our ears are stuffed up with those things that we already know, so listening becomes extraordinarily difficult. I think, or rather it is a fact, that if one can listen to something with all of one's being, with vigor, with vitality, then the very act of listening is a liberative factor. But unfortunately, you never do listen, as you have never learned about it. After all, you only learn when you give your whole being to something. When you give your whole being to mathematics, you learn. But when you are in a state of contradiction, when you do not want to learn, but are forced to learn, then it becomes merely a process of accumulation. To learn is like reading a novel with innumerable characters. It requires your full attention, not contradictory attention. If you want to learn about a leaf of the spring, or a leaf of the summer, you must really look at it. See the symmetry of it, the texture of it, the quality of the living leaf. There is beauty, there is vigor, there is vitality in a single leaf. So, to learn about the leaf, the flower, the cloud, the sunset, or a human being, you must look with all intensity. To learn, the mind must be quiet. To discover anything new, you must start on your own. You must start on a journey completely denuded, specially of knowledge, because it is very easy, through knowledge and belief, to have experiences, but those experiences are merely the products of self-projection, and therefore utterly unreal, false. If you are to discover for yourself what is the new, it is no good carrying the burden of the old, especially knowledge, the knowledge of another, however great. You use knowledge as a means of self-projection, security, and you want to be quite sure that you have the same experiences as the Buddha or the Christ or X. But a man who's protecting himself constantly through knowledge is obviously not a truth seeker. For the discovery of truth, there is no path. When you want to find something new, when you're experimenting with anything, your mind has to be very quiet, has it not? If your mind is crowded, filled with facts, knowledge, they act as an impediment to the new. The difficulty for most of us is that the mind has become so important, so predominantly significant, that it interferes constantly with anything that may be new, with anything that may exist simultaneously with the known. Thus, knowledge and learning are impediments for those who would seek, for those who would try to understand that which is timeless. Learning is not experience. The word learning has great significance. There are two kinds of learning. For most of us, learning means the accumulation of knowledge, of experience, of technology, of a skill, of a language. There is also psychological learning, learning through experience, either the immediate experiences of life, which leave a certain residue of tradition, of the race, of society. There are these two kinds of learning how to meet life, psychological and physiological, outward skill and inward skill. There is really no line of demarcation between the two. They overlap. We are not considering for the moment the skill that we learned through practice, the technological knowledge that we acquired through study. What we are concerned about is the psychological learning that we have acquired through the centuries or inherited as tradition, as knowledge, as experience. This we call learning, but I question whether it is learning at all. I'm not talking about learning a skill, a language, a technique, but I'm asking whether the mind ever learns psychologically. It has learned, and with what it has learned, it meets the challenge of life. It is always translating life or the new challenge according to what it has learned. This is what we are doing. Is that learning? Doesn't learning imply something new? Something that I don't know and I'm learning? If I'm merely adding to what I already know, it is no longer learning. When is learning possible? To inquire and to learn is the function of the mind. By learning, I do not mean the mere cultivation of memory or the accumulation of knowledge, but the capacity to think clearly and sanely without illusion, to start from facts and not from beliefs and ideals. There is no learning if thought originates from conclusions. Merely to acquire information or knowledge is not to learn. Learning implies the love of understanding and the love of doing a thing for itself. Learning is possible only when there is no coercion of any kind. And coercion takes many forms, does it not? There is coercion through influence, through attachment or threat, through persuasive encouragement, or subtle forms of reward. Most people think that learning is encouraged through comparison, whereas the contrary is the fact. Comparison brings about frustration and merely encourages envy, which is called competition. Like other forms of persuasion, comparison prevents learning and breeds fear. Learning is never accumulative. Learning is one thing and acquiring knowledge is another. Learning is a continuous process, not a process of addition, not a process which you gather and then from there act. Most of us gather knowledge as memory, as idea, store it up as experience, and from there act. That is, we act from knowledge, technological knowledge, knowledge as experience, knowledge as tradition, knowledge that one has derived through one's particular idiosyncratic tendencies. With that background, with that accumulation as knowledge, as experience, as tradition, we act. In that process, there is no learning. Learning is never accumulative. It is a constant movement. I do not know if you have ever gone into this question at all. What is learning and what is the acquisition of knowledge? Learning is never accumulative. You cannot store up learning and then from that storehouse act. You learn as you're going along. Therefore, there is never a moment of retrogression or deterioration or decline. For more information on Jiddu Krishnamurti and his teachings, please visit jkrishnamurti.org and kfoundation.org. Altruistic viewers, we appreciate your kind presence for today's program entitled True Listening and Learning from the Book of Life by Jiddu Krishnamurti, Vegetarian, Part 2 of 2, on Words of Wisdom.